Hello everyone. So in this video, we will be talking about customizing SharePoint list forms using PowerApps. Now before I start the video, I'd like to thank Plumsail for sponsoring this video. So while customizing the forms, we will be creating the forms using PowerApps. We will be looking at applying some themes and some background colors, formatting the form layout, and then applying some conditional and validation controls on the form. When it comes to customizing SharePoint list forms with PowerApps, there might be some limitations. I'll briefly show you another tool, which is Plumsail Forms for SharePoint, to overcome those PowerApps limitations. So stay tuned until the end of the video and I'll walk you through Plumsail Forms for SharePoint and also share the promo code so that you can get 10% off for your first year subscription. So let's start the video and see how we can customize the forms using PowerApps. So I currently have this list, which is called supplier information. Under this list, I have supplier name, company, phone number, email, address, status, verified by, and date verified. Now, status is basically a choice column. All of these are text columns. Phone number is a number. And then verified by is a person column, and date verified is basically a date column, right? So if I click on new for now, it basically opens up a standard out of the box list form for me, right? So, this, as I said, this is just a simple number column. And then we have status, which is basically a choice column. And I have three choices: not reviewed, reviewed, and verified. And date verified and verified by are two other columns. All of these columns are non-mandatory columns. So what we want to do is we want to design this form in PowerApps and perhaps put some conditional formatting so that the verified by and date verified columns are not visible unless you select the status verified, right? So when you select the status verified, then both of these columns becomes visible and also becomes mandatory. So this is some validation control, right? So we basically will be applying some conditional and validation controls on these two columns based on the value from the status column. In order to design this form into PowerApps, we have to go into PowerApps. Now, to do that, all you have to do is click on Integrate and then select PowerApps and then Customize Forms. So once we select this option, it's actually going to take us to the PowerApps. Okay, so I have my SharePoint list now opened within PowerApps, right? These are all the columns, which we have in our SharePoint list. But if you are missing any columns, you can always click on the Add Fields button from this section and select any of those columns, right? So for example, we have the ID column if you want to display an ID, and we have link to item, modified, modified by, right? So you can select these columns. Once you select these columns, let's just say we want to select modified and click add, then it's basically going to add that modified column onto our form. So which is basically added at the bottom. Now, modified is basically a read-only field because, obviously we cannot change those values. So it basically adds it as a read-only, but not as any text box for the other fields, right? So I'm going to delete this column for now because we don't need it. So I'm going to remove it. So we have our SharePoint list, right? And it's a form. Before we start making any tweaks, so let's have a look what else we have on this page, right? So obviously, right-hand side, we have our all the fields. And as you can see that this whole square, which means our whole form is selected. And on the far right side, we have the properties for this form. So for example, the form name is SharePoint Form 1, right? And this is the data source is basically the supplier information, which is our SharePoint list. And then we have some advanced properties, right? These are some actions on the form, basically what to do when the buttons are pressed. Okay, let's not worry about these for now. On the left hand side, if you see that it's basically says that form screen 1 and then SharePoint Form 1, which is this form. Under the SharePoint Form 1, it actually creates data cards, right? So all of these data cards are basically these little fields we have. So for example, when I select supplier name, I can see that it has selected this data card. Now within the data card, we obviously have a label, and then we have our text box as well. And then we have some labels to display the error messages. So if I select the text box, the text box is basically data card value 1, right? So on the right hand side, that's the name of this particular text box. Similarly, we have all of these data cards added onto our SharePoint form. Let's first try to add the header on this form, right? We want to customize this form. So let's try to add the header at the top of the form. Okay. In order to add a header, what we need to do is we need to click on this plus button on your left hand side, and then we select the text label. Okay. Once we select the text label, this little box appears. So I'm going to drag it to the top and select it and basically stretch it to the far right. Okay, so that's done. Then I'm going to select my form. So I'm going to select on the sides of the form, or you can click on the bar, this little bar you have, so that your form is selected. Or you can select the form from your left hand side. Once you select your form, you're going to select it and drag it down so that it's actually below the text area, right? So this is our text label that we have added, and that's our form area at the top, right? So I'm going to basically drag it to the top. So let's just stretch it a little bit more so that it kind of sits right on top, right? So that's our header area. Now let's give it a background color. So while I have the header area selected, I'm going to click on background color, and let's just say I want to give it a dark green color for the background. Okay, and we want to change our text to the name of the form. So I'm going to double click on this text, and I'm going to say supplier information, right? So once you change your text, you can select the text, and then we can change the color of the text to white, and then also make this bold, and I'm going to increase the size to maybe, let's just say 14 points, so the font is a bit bigger, and I'm going to align it into the center. So we have our supplier information, right? If you want, you can add some images and or icons on the header as well. So to add an icon, so I'm going to click on the plus button again, and on the left hand side I can see that there are some icons. I can click on the icon, and I'm going to find a suitable icon for this. So this is a supplier information. So something like if we have some people, or which kind of represents that's actually a person or something. So I'm going to search for something, or let's just say log journal, right? This one sounds fine, and I'm going to click on that, and then simply drag it to the position where I want it. And while I have this icon selected, I can change the color of this. So I'm going to change this to white so that it matches, and then we have our icon. Similarly, you can add more icons or you can add images at the top. Now we have our header ready. This is all white, so let's just do something about this as well. So what I'm going to do is select our form, the main form, and I'm going to basically change the background of this to, let's just say, light green so that it matches the color. While I have done that, you can see that all of these icons are blue, but you can actually apply a theme as well. So at the top, I don't have anything selected. So at the top, you can see that there is actually a theme. So if you select on the theme, you can actually select a theme. So I've got the green kind of thing going on. So I'm going to select the green theme. So when I select the green theme, you can see that the icon color basically has changed to green, right? So that way you can actually change your theme. If you want different colors, obviously you can go to the background color and change it to different colors as well, which is going to change the colors of your form. But I didn't have this form selected this time, so it did not change it. But because let's just say I want to select this form and I want to change the background color to light blue, for example, right? So it has done that. But because we have applied a theme, the green theme, so the icon is still green, right? So this way you can actually play with the colors and the backgrounds and the themes. So I'm going to change the background color to light green again so that it's kind of matches. Okay, now we have applied the theme and the backgrounds and our header is ready. Let's try to change the form into a different layout. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to go to the top and then we're going to click on the settings, right? Once you click on settings and then click on display, right, there is the orientation for this form. So currently this is into a portrait mode, but we have the option to change it into a landscape mode. Once I change the landscape, I click apply, and you have some sizes that you can apply as well. You can make it small, large, or you can provide a custom size. I'm going to keep it to large for now. So I've done that, and I'm then going to close this window. Now you can see that now the form is into landscape mode, right? And all the fields are kind of stretched to the end, but the top is still it's kind of not stretched enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it and stretch it to the end. Now we have our form. Okay, while we have our form in landscape, there are some properties that we can actually change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the form again, and under properties I can see that it's currently set to columns, and then column is only one column displaying. But I can always change the columns to 2 columns or change it to 3 columns, right? So we have this flexibility. You can have a 3-column form or 2-column form depending upon your requirements. I'm going to change it to 2-column form, and so that it looks nice, and then we can have our buttons on the sides as well. Let's see how it looks in our SharePoint list with this side of settings. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to publish this form. So to publish the form, you can go to the top right hand side and you will see this little icon. So I'm going to click on that icon, and which is going to save the form to PowerApps and then publish. So I'm going to click on publish to SharePoint. So when we do that, this form is now published to SharePoint and setting the form as a default form to be opened when you try to add a new list item or edit existing list item, right? So let's go back to SharePoint again. I'll click on back to SharePoint and then I'll click leave. So it is now going to take us to our SharePoint list, which is the supplier list that where we customize this form to. Okay, so this is our SharePoint list. So if I click on new, right, I still get this old form. This is because sometimes this form is cached. You probably have to reload your page again and maybe try to open this list in a new tab or new window. So I'm just going to right click and say reload. I might have to do it a couple of times, but that's how it actually works. Sometimes it's just cached, right? So looks like it's bringing up my changes, and that's the form that I can see, right? So this is how the default behavior would look like. So if I enter the supplier name, for example, let's just say John Green, right? And the company is XYZ, and that's the phone number. I'm just going to type the random number, and that's the email. That's the text field. So I'm just going to say info@xyz.com. Address is Australia, and then we have the status. So currently we do not have any conditional controls or any validation controls assigned. So for example, these two fields are still visible, right? Even if I select not reviewed, these are still visible. Although they are not mandatory, but still visible. But we will be looking at how to actually apply some conditional validations on these two fields in a minute. Okay, so I've got nothing attached, and we have our same cancel buttons at the top. We will also be adding some save and cancel buttons on the form here, right? So let's just say save. And once this is saved, all the information is in your list. If you select this document again, and let's just say click on edit, it's going to open the form in the Power Apps layout, right? So how cool is that, right? With a very little tweaks, we basically customize this form. Okay, now let's go back to Power Apps again and try to add some conditional formatting, right? So I'm going to click on integrate again, then I'm going to click on Power Apps and then customize forms. Once you have the form opened, now what we want to do is we want to apply some conditional validation on these two fields. So what we basically want to do is we want to say that when the status of this column is equals to verified, then display these two fields. Okay, so what we need to do is first is to get the name of this control, because we want to say that when the value for this control is something, then make these visuals. Okay, so I'm going to click on this status field, right? Because this is where we want to apply our conditional validation. And I'm going to click on the top and double click it, and I'm going to copy this name because we need this name, right? So as I said earlier, so these are all the fields are created as a data cards. So we need the name of this data card because we want to apply some conditions on the value of this data card. Okay, so we copy that. Now what we want to do is we want to click on verified by, right? So that the whole data card is selected, including the label as well. Okay. Because we want to apply some conditions on this so that it's only visible when the value of this is verified. Okay. While you have this selected, I'm going to click on advanced on the right hand side because we are going to make some changes to the properties. I'm going to click on unlock to change properties. When you do that, this is unlocked and we can make changes. So I'm actually looking for a property called visible, right? So I'm going to search in this search box for a property called visible. So visible, right? So this is the property and I'm going to select the property visible. So currently this is set to true, but we want this to be visible only when the value of this is verified. So I'm going to delete that true and I'm going to say, and I'm going to paste the name of the status data card that we have copied earlier. So I'm going to paste that and then I'm going to say dot selected, right? Dot selected dot value. So when the selected value of this data card is equals to verified, verified, right? So when the value of this is verified, then make that column visible. So you can see that that column is already disappeared because the value is not verified. So I'm going to copy this because I might need it for the date verified column as well. Okay, so I'm going to copy that and then I'm going to select date verified. Okay, and I'm going to unlock to change the properties and I'm going to search for the property visible, and in this function box I'm going to basically paste the same condition that we have for the verified by column. Okay, so as you can see that the date verified and verified by columns are now disappeared. Okay, so that's done. Okay, we have basically done that, so those columns are not visible. So let's click on the preview, right? You probably notice something when I click on preview, and I'll tell you what it is when I click on it. So when I click on preview, it basically opens up this pane where we have this information coming from our existing list item that we created earlier. But if you had nothing in your SharePoint list, this won't display anything. Okay, because let's just cross this one, because the property on this form, if I go to the properties page, the default mode is basically the edit mode, right? If I change the default mode to new, then it will open up a new box. So as in if you are adding a new list item. So if you didn't have anything in your SharePoint list, it will still open that preview box. So let's keep it to new so that even if we delete the list item, we can still open it. But it's not going to change anything for you, so which is fine. So let's click on the preview button again, and within the preview I can see that those two columns are not visible. If I change the status value to verified, these two columns are now visible. Okay, so we have applied the conditional validation. Now apply some validation controls as well, so that these are mandatory columns when they are visible. Okay, so I'm going to close the preview and then I'm going to basically select that verified by data card from left hand side, or I can select it from there as well. But if this is not visible because the value is not verified, you can always select the whole data card from your left hand side. Okay, so while I have this selected, this time I'll click on advanced and rather than visible, I'm going to select on the property called required. So if I say required and click on required, currently required is set to false, which means this is not a mandatory column. We can't just make it true, otherwise this column will always be required, right? But what we want to do is we want to say that when the value of this status column is verified, then make this column mandatory. So I'm going to delete that false from the function, and I'm going to paste the same value which we use for the visible control, which is when the data card value 6, which means the value of the status column, is equals to verified, then make this mandatory. Okay. You probably noticed that when we added that function, there is actually a asterisk on the left hand side of this, which means it is mandatory. We don't have a asterisk on date verified because it is still required false. Okay, so we have done that. Now let's do the same thing for date verified. So I'm going to select date verified, and I'm going to select for the property called required, click on required, and I'm going to paste the same function, Control V, and then you can see that now this field is also mandatory. Okay, so let's have a look at the preview now. If I click on the preview, this is, let's just say it's not reviewed, so these two columns are not there. And when I change this to verified, both of these are visible and these are mandatory columns. Okay, perfect. So we have applied some conditional formatting and validation, so that is perfect. Now let's try to add some buttons. Okay, so we want to add a save and a cancel button as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the plus button again on the left hand side, and then I'm going to select a button, right? And that's our button which is added there. So I'm going to drag this button on the right hand side, and I'm going to double click on this so that the text is selected, and I'm going to call this submit. Okay, if you want, you can always make this button bigger by dragging and dropping it. And while you have this selected, you can obviously change the background color of this button. So let's say we want to make this blue, and you can also change the font color of this button. So if you want red color, for example, doesn't look good, let's just keep it white, right? So you can change it. You can actually change the font to be bold and increase the size as well if you want to. So that's our submit button. Okay, you can select that button, and if you want to add another button, you can basically say Control C and Control V, right? Once you do that, it actually creates another button. So I'm going to drag this button to the right hand side, and I'm going to call this cancel. Okay, and let's just change the background color so that it's differentiable, and then this is cancel button. Okay, so we have these two buttons, submit and cancel. Now we have added the buttons, but when the button is pressed, we want something to happen, right? So which means we need to provide another property to this. So what we are going to do is select this button and click on advanced, and then we are looking for a property called on select. You can see that this property is already there. So but if not, but you can always select for on select and then click on select. So currently on select is equals to false, which means it's not going to do anything, but we want to submit our form. Okay, so I'm going to delete false, and I'm going to say submit form. Okay, And then in brackets, we have to provide the form name. Now, you know that our form name is SharePoint Form 1. So I'm going to select that and I'm going to close the brackets. And that's it. We have our submit button ready. Okay. And then we have to do something for the cancel button as well. So I'm going to select the cancel button now, and I'm going to search for on select property again, right? For the cancel button, what we want to do is, rather than submitting the form, we basically want to reset the form. Once the form is reset, and we then want to hide the form. Okay, so we want to do two things. So on select, we're going to click on select. Currently it is set to false. So the first thing we're going to do is to reset the SharePoint form 1. So I'm going to say reset form, and then which form, which is our SharePoint form 1, right? We do that. So that's one action that we have added on this button. And then we put the semicolon, and we have to hide the form as well. Okay. Then we say there is another function we can use, which is called request hide. So I'll select request hide, close the brackets, and that's it. We have our form ready. Okay. Let's see how it looks into our SharePoint list now. So to do that, we have to publish the form, and once it's done, we say publish to SharePoint, and then it's going to take us to the SharePoint list when we click on back to SharePoint. You don't have to click back to SharePoint all the time. You can actually open this SharePoint list into a new tab and have PowerApps opened in another tab, right? Rather than clicking on back to SharePoint again. Now we are back, but we probably might not see our changes as now, because the form might be cached, right? Which is true because we don't see our buttons. So I'm going to reload this page, or I can open the form in another tab, but let's just reload it so that the cache is cleared. And let's see if it brings up the new form. Yep, looks like it is bringing. Okay. We have our two buttons. So let's see what the conditions does first. So let's say our supplier name again is Andrew, company name is something, and then we have phone number, email, and then we have address. Now, status column, if we select not reviewed, nothing happens. If we select reviewed, nothing happens. If we select verified, then we have to provide information to both of these columns. Okay. Let's say if we don't provide information and then click on submit, then it automatically knows the column name. It says verified by is required. Date verified is required. So we have our formatting. Now verified by, let's just enter some information. So let's just say it's Peter Smith, and the date verified, when you click on that, that's the date. I click OK, and then I click submit. So it has submitted the form. Right. Let's see how the cancel button behaves. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to click edit. And this time we want to say cancel. So cancel, basically cancel the form, and nothing happened, right? So that's how you can actually customize your forms. This was a pretty simple example of how you can customize, but you can actually do a lot of things. You can have some bars which can change the color, which, when you have an error. So you can apply some conditional formatting based on the, error messages, and with, for example, that the background of the whole header becomes red when there is an error, something like that. So you can do a lot of cool things in PowerApps and customize the out-of-the-box behavior. But let's say if you want to go back to your original form now, you don't want PowerApps forms and you want to go back to your original out of the box SharePoint forms, then what do? Let's click on the list settings. So I'm going to click on the settings gear and then list settings. Now under list settings, I'll click on form settings, and under form settings, I should be seeing that this is actually using the custom forms created in PowerApps, right? So if you want to go back to your default SharePoint form, you can simply select this option and click OK. And then once you do that, then it will basically open up your forms in out-of-box SharePoint. But at this point, it hasn't deleted anything, right? Your PowerApps forms are still there. So if I click on New, then it should give me the default out-of-the-box layout, right? So, but if you ever want to go back to PowerApps again, you can always click on the settings gear, list settings, and then click form settings. And then you click use a custom form created in PowerApps, right? You can also click on the see versions and usage, right? So if I click on, let's just say I select OK first so that we have our custom form selected, and then I click on form settings again, and I click on see versions and usage. When you click on that, obviously it's going to take us to the PowerApps portal, and under PowerApps, then it is going to show us how many versions that we have created for this form, and what are the analytics, how the form is being used, which might be handy if you really want to know, how many people are actually using the form in your organization and what they're actually doing with that. So on this page, I can click on the versions, and under the versions, it will show me version 3 is a live version, and these are the other 2 versions that I have created. You can always click on the more commands. You can restore the previous versions, or you can delete those versions. You can click on the connections. Then it basically shows you, where is this connecting to, which is connecting to SharePoint list, and then whether it has any flows attached, and what are the analytics, which is currently in preview. So it basically kind of generates a Power BI report for the usage of your form. It can generate a report on the usage, performance, and the location of the form, right? So this is all out of the box. So this could be pretty handy if you really want to know how many people are using and where they are actually using it from. So you can actually make use of analytics as well. Currently I don't have any data because the form hasn't refreshed yet, but eventually if I come back to it probably tomorrow, then I should have some stats. If you would like more flexibility and power over your custom SharePoint forms, I would recommend you try Plumsail Forms. This tool provides more flexibility and advanced features out of the box. Easily divide the form into logical sections with tabs, accordions, wizards, and complex grids. Customize the appearance of lookup fields to show additional information and images. And create multi-level cascading drop-downs with no code. With the list or library control, combine multiple lists or document libraries and work with related items from other lists and libraries, even ones located on different sites. You can edit all relevant information in a single responsive form. You can also filter a list or library control to show relevant information and group items by their status. All this and more can be done in a handy drag and drop designer, where you can manipulate all the fields and controls. Create different forms for new, edit, and display forms. SharePoint forms customized with Plumsail are responsive by default. If you want to, you can create completely unique views for mobile and tablets. You can also select how to open the form from the list view, in full screen or panel, and choose the panel size. Unlike forms customized with PowerApps, you don't need to recreate them to reuse. Plumsail Forms has a built-in feature to export and import forms. More than that, you can design forms once and automate their deployment to other lists, sites, and Microsoft 365 tenants with the Plumsail Forms provisioning framework. You can try Plumsail Forms for SharePoint for free during the first month. The link is under the video description. With the promo code TOSHIT, you will also get 10% off your first year subscription. So in this video, we've seen that how you can actually customize the SharePoint list forms using PowerApps. For some cases and advanced scenarios, it may require certain efforts. Alternatively, you can use Plumsail Forms for SharePoint, which has some advanced features out of the box. I hope you liked the video, and if you have any comments or feedback, please put them below in the comment section. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.